Illegal alien drug smuggler Osvaldo Aldrete-Davila was sentenced to more than 9 years in prison on drug charges. He was the key witness in the case against former Border Patrol agents Ramos and Compean. Now, supporters of the agents are outraged that the drug smuggler received a shorter sentence than the two law enforcement officers who tried to apprehend him. Casey Wyan reports.
Osvaldo Aldrete-Davila, an illegal alien drug smuggler, was sentenced by an El Paso federal judge to 9.5 years in prison for helping smuggle 2 large loads of marijuana into the United States in 2005. Later, Davila appeared in the same courtroom under immunity from prosecution by U.S. Attorney Johnny Sutton to testify against Border Patrol agents Ignacio Ramos and Jose Compean. They had previously intercepted Davila with another drug load near the border. Davila was shot and wounded after a struggle and escaped to Mexico. Ramos and Compean were convicted of assault, failing to properly report the shooting, and using a firearm to commit a crime. They were sentenced by the same judge to 11 and 12 years in prison. Supporters are furious the smuggler, who continued to run drugs while testifying against Ramos and Compean, received a shorter sentence than the agents.
How dare they compare a drug dealer to law enforcement officers? How can it be that they would get almost the same identical sentence? My husband's been given a year more. Where's the justice system here?
The jury that convicted Ramos and Compean was prohibited from hearing testimony about Davila's drug smuggling history. An appellate court recently overturned Ramos and Compean's convictions for failing to properly report the shooting, but upheld their convictions for using a firearm to commit a crime, which carries a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence. The agents say as Davila ran toward Mexico, they saw the smuggler turn toward them with a shiny object in his hand. Davila denied that during the trial. At his sentencing, Davila called the shooting an accident, which enraged Agent Ramos' family.
You've been sentenced. They can't touch you anymore. Why don't you tell the truth about Ramos and Compean?
Congressman Duncan Hunter said in a statement, the sentencing of Osvaldo Aldrete-Davila offers the president yet another opportunity to do what is right and either pardon or commute the sentences of agents Ramos and Compean. Davila's attorney argued for an even lesser sentence because of his injuries and low rank among the drug smuggling organization. Judge Kathleen Cardone declined, saying she didn't believe him. She also discounted Davila's story that he was forced to continue smuggling drugs because he had to repay the cartel for losing the first marijuana load. Prosecutors said despite Davila's guilty plea, they received little cooperation from the smuggler in going after higher-ups in the drug cartel. Kitty?
Thanks very much, Casey Wyan. Well, this broadcast and many federal lawmakers are fighting to overturn the miscarriage of justice in the Ramos and Compean case. And one of the congressmen leading the battle to clear the names of the 2 former Border Patrol agents joins me now. It's Congressman Brian Bilbray from San Diego. And thanks for being with us, sir.
Honor to be with you, Kitty.
Your reaction to the Aldrete-Davila sentence, less than Ramos and Compean?
Just discuss dismay. You talk about the injustice of the justice system. It's an oxymoron. And, we're talking about men and women that are along the border, fighting to defend our country. And this is sort of just reflects a prejudice against those who are serving as opposed to those who are the predators on our society, just crossing the border at will and then using the abuse of our agents as some way to hide from justice.
We're now joined by Congressman Dana Rohrabacher from Irvine, California, who will join us in this discussion. Congressman Rohrabacher, your reaction to the sentencing today?
Well, people need to pay attention to the details here. The prosecutors and now are arguing that Davila, the illegal alien drug smuggler, was not a minor player, was a major player in a drug ring, and that he did this professionally. That's how he earned his living. They never let the jury for Ramos and Compean know that. And in fact, a lot of they wouldn't even gone after this guy Davila if it wasn't for the fact that information was leaked to my office originally that showed that there was a second drug deal that this man had been fingered for. That too they wouldn't let the jury know about. So this today not only the injustice of the fact that you have this drug dealer receiving a smaller sentence or a shorter sentence than the Border Patrol agents, but just the whole way this thing was done calls into question the decision to prosecute these people in the first place.
You know, we do have a quote from U.S. Attorney Johnny Sutton. He released a statement about today's sentencing. He was a prosecutor, and let me read that for the benefit of our viewers. I've been clear from the beginning of this case that my office would prosecute this drug smuggler when we had the evidence to prove his guilt, and thanks to the hard work of the agents of the DEA and DHS, Homeland Security Office of Inspector General, and federal prosecutors in my office, he is on his way to federal prison to serve the sentence that he so justly deserves. Your reaction to that?
Well, that's no big victory for us at all. Ramos and Compean, these are innocent men who protected us by putting their lives on the line for 10 and 5 years on the border. They're still in prison. I don't care what happens to that drug smuggler.
And Sutton is totally missing the bet of trying to cover himself on this issue. We're talking about a battle zone down there at the border. You realize 3 times more people have been killed by the drug cartel in the last 6 months than all the men and women in Iraq and Afghanistan combined have been killed in the last 6 months. And that Sutton is now trying to cover himself on this thing. These agents were serving in an area where there had been firefights with drug dealers with automatic weapons. They were under pressure. There's Border Patrol agents everywhere. Let me just say this. This is not about Border Patrol agents. This is about every man and woman who's down there at the border fighting to defend our country. And we ought to be standing up and making sure that this kind of justice not only doesn't happen to these 2 agents, but no other agents, and make sure that we send a signal to everybody who's serving our country, defending our southern border, that we'll stand up and protect them and not allow this to happen.
We need to hear from John McCain. We need to hear from John McCain. And he needs to make his position very clear on this. He should be reaching out and saying, I will pardon Ramos and Compean, if he expects those of us who are concerned about the border to have faith in him that he's going to protect our national security interests.
You know, we pointed out on this broadcast that the Mexican military or law enforcement agents have illegally crossed the border 42 times since October, and Border Patrol agents were held at gunpoint by the Mexican military. Congressman Bilbray, you talk about the deteriorating situation on this border.
We didn't give them 10 years, Kitty. We didn't take those Mexican police officers and give them 10 years because they committed a crime with a gun. That just shows you the selective realism that they have down there, and it's almost as if it's politically incorrect to be protecting the neighborhoods of America from these drug smugglers.
You know, members of Congress have been asking since July of last year for President Bush to pardon Ramos and Compean. 75 members of Congress have signed a letter authorized by Congressman Ted Poe to commute the sentences of Ramos and Compean. No response from the White House.
No response from the White House, but as I say, we are in a presidential election year. Anyone who's listening right now should make sure that Senator McCain goes on the record as to whether or not he will pardon Ramos and Compean.
And Senator Obama.
Well, Senator, I would hope Senator Obama, but I've almost written off the Democrats on this, but if he steps forward, I think it'd be a good thing for his campaign.
If he says that he's for change, then show us with some change of the way you're treating our agents at the border. Well, that's the challenge.
That's a fair point. I'd like to point out that a letter that Congressman Ted Poe wrote to the president, and it reads, the national attention given this case has had a demoralizing effect on the men and women defending America at our border, while at the same time it sends the right message to criminals seeking to do our nation harm. Is there a long-term damage
well, already we can see it every day right now. When
you can see it during the 4th of July break. That I was up by Spooner's Mesa, Smuggler's Gulch, and the agents were telling me that snipers were shooting at them across the border. So this has already had not just an effect on the morale, but also on the activity of the drug smugglers.
But every day, listen, every day somebody in California gets raped. Somebody gets run down by a drunk driver who's an illegal immigrant. Every day we see our kids being shortchanged in our schools, or we have our health care denied us because we have to wait in line behind a bunch of illegals who are in the emergency room. And every day we're suffering here because for the last 20 years we've had the wrong policy. Now we have Johnny Sutton undermining the last line of defense that we had, which are our Border Patrol agents. He made the prosecutorial decision. He didn't have to. He could decide who he would charge and who he would not charge. He decided to charge the Border Patrol agents, and then he wasn't even going to let the jury know that this drug dealer that they intercepted was involved in a second drug deal. I mean, this whole thing stinks.
That pretty much sums it up. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher and Congressman Brian Bilbray, thank you very much for joining us.